Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. Tonight, we're going to be talking about managing hybrid infrastructures with Azure Arc and PowerShell. But before we get started, let me say hello to my co-host, Phil Bossman. Hey, Phil, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. It's good time tonight.
And who is our speaker this evening?
Well, tonight we're having Matt Dowst, and he's a managing consultant for Acquisitive. And Matt's passionate about all things DevOps and automation, and then using multiple technologies. PowerShell is one of them, but certainly Azure Arc and DevOps overall. So we're really excited to have you, Matt. Welcome.
Thanks.
Hey,
Glad
Matt.
to be here.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. So what are we talking about tonight?
Talking about Azure Arc and PowerShell and essentially how you can manage your entire infrastructure through just a couple of simple scripts to be able to connect to all your different machines and devices, whether they're in Azure and another cloud or on premise.
All right. And so for the people who may not be familiar with this kind of stuff, what's your background and how did you get started in this area of managing hybrid infrastructure?
So background, system administrator, working as a consultant. I went into automation, uh, the chief architect of our managed automation solution at Acquisitive. And the large part of that is managing hybrid infrastructures. We try to focus on one technology or another, but once you start getting out there in the field, you see that everything is everywhere. So trying to design solutions to be able to enable customers to quickly adapt and adjust and things along those lines is where a lot of this has come from.
So it sounds like you're dealing with multi-cloud and on-prem.
Yes.
Yeah, and probably multiple OSs too.
Yep.
Yeah, so you got everything there.
Yep. So
Awesome.
sounds like great technology, and then let's get going.
Yeah, so we're going to turn it over to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoy the presentation. If you're joining the Research Triangle PowerShell user group for the first time on YouTube, check out our channel. We have plenty of other videos. But right now, we're going to focus on Mr. Matt and take it away.
Thanks, guys. So, as I mentioned, the purpose here is to really kind of show how Azure Arc can be used as the next level in remote PowerShell management, right? So, just kind of the quick history on that. PowerShell 5.1 was based on WS-Man. It was Windows only. With PowerShell 7, they added the OpenSSH, which allowed cross-platform, but still you have to be able to locally talk to all those machines. You have your hypervisor base, with VMware, Hyper-V, whichever one you choose. But again, you still need access to the at least local access to the host. When Azure came along, it really kind of changed the platform because they introduced the run command, which allows you to run a command directly inside an Azure VM from essentially anywhere that you have a port 443 open on. And now an extension of that, which Microsoft introduced last year and has recently come out of preview, is Azure Arc. What Azure Arc does is it's agent based that goes onto your local machine, and it provides you a lot of the capabilities that you would receive as if it were an Azure VM. Right? So this VM could be in AWS, it could be in a vSphere cloud, it could be on Hyper-V, it could be a physical box. It doesn't matter as long as it can talk to Azure. You can receive the different supports, and some of the support is applying Azure policies, insights monitoring, all those type of things. And another part of that is they've extended that remote command execution to it as well. So we'll kind of see here how you can get that, kind of prep your environment for being able to create this. And a great example of these scripts I'm going to show, I originally wrote when Log4j came out, right? Because we had lots people asking, "Hey, we have machines everywhere," and Log4j was affecting Windows, it was affecting Linux. You know, how can we search across all of these devices and get a consolidated report back on what machines may be affected? And our customers that had Azure Arc, it was simple. We half a day had a script up and running and scanning their entire environment, coming back and checking all of their devices for any Log4j vulnerabilities. Which included checking registries, checking installed applications, actually file level searches, all of those type of things. Essentially anything that you could do with a PowerShell script, you can now do on any remote machine that you have in there. So, uh, another before Azure Arc, another way to be able to do this was kind of through hybrid runbook workers through the Azure automation platform. And these still do play a really strong role. They have a lot more capabilities than what you would have with Azure Arc script extension. So similar in the way that it works, there's an agent on the machine. You register the machine with Azure. However, when you build a hybrid runbook worker, it has the full capabilities of Azure automation, which includes the built-in key vaults, variables, all those type of things, and all your different runbooks, load balancing, stuff like that. So that's really for building a fully automated solution, right? Something that's going to run over and over and over again. What we're going to be talking about today is the Azure VM run command and the Arc script extension are more of your ad hoc type situations, right? You don't have a systems management integration thing that you need to get out to different environments. You have GPOs can't go out to your Linux boxes, those type of things, right? So we're going to take a look at how you can use these two systems together to really create that holistic solution there for you. So the Azure VM run command, right? If you haven't seen it, you can literally go into the Azure portal, open up a box, type in a PowerShell command, and it'll execute on that box and come back and report to you. There are two PowerShell commands for it, which can get kind of, it makes it a little more, people wonder, well, which one do I use, right? So the invoke run command allows for the ad hoc execution, but it is a one-time execution. So it's going to go out, it's going to run that script, it's going to sit there, and your machine's going to spin the whole time it's doing, and it's going to pop out the results. The set Azure run command allows you to actually send that command to that machine and then run it in the background. So you free up your session, which you'll see here in just a minute, to allow you to continue doing other things. So if you have multiple machines you need to check, you don't have to wait for each one to be able to respond, right? You send the command to 10 of them and then poll them and wait till you get your responses back. And they also support a run as. So by default, everything runs as the system account. But if you need it to run as a different account, it can do that as well. Right now, there is not a commandlet to run the commands on an Arc server. So as you'll see, we'll be having to do some REST API to get through there. But the functionality becomes the same. And the functionality is essentially the process, right? We need to get a list of our devices. We need to get the script to execute. We need to execute the script, and then we need to get the results from it, right? And it's no matter where you're running, whether you're running PowerShell 5.1 WS-Man or you're running Arc, it's all gonna, that process is gonna remain the same, all right? So, real quick before we jump into the code. So just to kind of show, one of the benefits of Arc here is I have Azure virtual machines and I have Arc servers, which are on premise and not in a Hyper-V host, all together in one spot, right? So I can go in here and I can tag them, I can apply policies, I can apply Defender for them, all those type of things right here inside the portal. So actually, if I open up a Arc server, you can see all the different
You're not sharing.
apply updates.
You're not sharing yet.
Oh,
I see.
did it come through?
Oh, never mind.
see.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Matt, I had a question for you.
Yes.
And so when you get to a natural break here, you don't have to do this right now, but there's probably some people that have never seen Arc before, maybe don't even know the premise, right? So maybe if when you get an opportunity, if we can just explain the overarching idea of what Arc is, what it's used for, and like the idea behind the agents that you would deploy or something like that.
Yep, definitely. So, Mission Arc is a way to be able to bring your on-premise or other cloud resources into Azure, right? So tonight we're actually going to look at servers, but you can actually bring in SQL boxes, you can bring in Kubernetes clusters, and you'll now see in preview where you can actually join in a VMware center or a virtual machine manager device. And what that'll do is that'll create an object up in Azure for all of your on-premise devices. So you can then maintain all of those. You can use the Azure tagging and things like that, or cost centers to go back to those. You can also use it for deploying updates, deploying Azure policy, monitoring insights. Essentially, a lot of the things that come out of the box with a Azure VM, you now have those capabilities on any server running anywhere, right? All it needs to have is 443 up into Azure.
And so just to expand on that a little bit, so it's agent based in almost all cases, right?
Yes.
And so you're deploying an agent to machines, and what that agent is doing is essentially delivering the ability of Azure Arc console to act as a single pane of glass so that all the important stuff that you will want to know about your infrastructure objects, regardless of their location, as Matt said, on-prem, in the Azure cloud, in other clouds, you can manage from one convenient place. And then you can execute commands against those objects all from one place. That's the premise behind Azure Arc.
And Microsoft has made it very easy for you to be able to onboard devices in here. You can actually click through here and it will generate a PowerShell script for you to join all of your devices into Arc. So getting them into Arc is the first step in the process. And then from there, there's untold things you can do. Like I said, you can run them through update management. You can apply policies to them. You can apply Defender. Some things have cost to them. Some are free. I think updates and policies are free. Defender is going to have charges behind it. But just putting an Arc server in here itself, there's no charge, right? So you can put an Arc server in here, and one of the best uses that we've seen from it is just being able to keep track of everything. If you have servers that are in on premise and in Azure, it's hard to kind of maintain like which one's where and who's in charge of that one and those type of things. This makes it really easy because you can like I said, you can see them all here in one pane of glass. You can add tagging to them. You can manage them. Pull all the insights in together without having to join a bunch of disparate systems into each other. And again, if you're using hypervisors, you can now join those hypervisors in there and it'll automatically pull in all of the guest VMs. And, as was mentioned before, right? So you have on an Azure VM, you have the ability to go in here and run a command, right? I can run a PowerShell script. I could, get server, get service, what have you. And it will run and it'll output whatever command I put in there. ArcBox has a similar functionality, but through the console, it's not quite as clean. It requires that you have your code stored up in a storage blob, and then it creates a connection out to it. It's It's not the prettiest thing, uh, but it's getting there. You got to remember this Arc is Gen 1, right? And Azure VMs have been around for 10 years now. So now for the fun part, the code, right?
Before you hit the code, I got one question for you. So, a gentleman in the chat was asking, does I know you mentioned that the preview of vCenter management, and he's asking, does it support VMware VMs? And what I think he's asking is, can you manage VMware VMs directly? And I think the answer is no. You just put an agent on it and treat it like any other node, right? You're not connecting vCenter, and then that gives you the ability to manage all your vCenter objects through the vCenter, right? Or am I wrong about that?
Uh, you are correct. I would say that I see it coming. Like if you look at some of the preview stuff that they have in here, they now have these Azure Arc virtual machines, which allow you to deploy a Azure image to a local private cloud. And I know that before they even got VMM in here, they got vCenter in here.
Mm.
So right now, what this vCenter does is you install it on the vCenter and it installs the agents for you, right? It just helps you, and whenever you deploy a new item, it's going to automatically get added in there. It doesn't provide you the functionality of vCenter, so you can't like provision a VM through it, right? But you do have what it will do is it'll bring the devices into here.
But you can also then manage your ESX hosts as a node in there to see CPU and RAM usage on those as well.
Yes, certainly good.
Yeah. And so the other question in chat, just this is an easy one. I probably can do it, but someone would like to know, is it easy to install the agent for a bulk of machines like 100 or 200? And so Matt was just saying earlier that Arc will provide us a very generic, simple script to get Azure Arc agents installed on the machines. You just need a method to deploy those scripts, and that could be any number of options.
So if you currently have your devices enrolled in log analytics, that becomes the easiest way because you can sit here and click this button, and what it's going to do is going to change the log analytics agent to the Arc agent. But if you also have the ability to come in here and generate a script that you can deploy out to multiple environments, and it becomes pretty straightforward. You go in here, enter all your things, and then be like, here's your script. Go run this on your devices, and they'll all come in there. And I've never had any issues with this script running. It has always worked wonderfully. So I've done it through GPOs. I've done it through Config Manager, or just straight through remote PowerShell. Very, very quick and easy to get them on board. All right. So, as we were talking about before, running a command on a Azure VM is really straightforward. You have the set Azure RM command, right? I just have a simple script here. It's just going to give me back the name of the computer, right? When you're using the set run command, you also want to give it a run command name. And what that'll do is that'll allow you to go back and look up that that job at a later time, right? So if I just go ahead and kick this off real quick, we can see it just created a job. So I did the as job here so that it runs as a PowerShell job in the background, releases my session so that I can continue on and do some other things. So if we pop over here and we can run the same exact commands, but we're going to hit a Linux box. The only real difference here is that an Azure VM by default is going to use PowerShell, Windows VM, sorry, is going to use PowerShell by default. It's going to use 5.1. A Linux box is going to use shell. All right, so if you do want to run a PowerShell command, you need to run it as you would do like a run command, right? So we do the same thing here. We're just going to kick it off. Created another background job. These jobs will auto update themselves so we can see this one completed. And then all we're going to do is go back here and get the run command. So based upon that name that we created, and we're going to get our results back. And then we see that the output view is the name of the box. And if there's any errors, those would all show up in there, right? On the Linux side, pretty much the same exact thing. There we go. We have our Azure Linux server. Now, when it comes to Arc, it's a little different because, as I mentioned, there is no command for running in Arc. So as you see here, it's getting a little hairier, but it's you write this once, and this essentially becomes your command, right? And as you'll see, we'll turn it into a function here in a little bit. But some of the differences here are the name here has to be custom script extension. That's just the name of the extension in Azure. It has to be set to that. This force update tag is what tells it to redeploy this function. So if I deploy this out without this force update tag on here, if I've already deployed this before, it's not going to rerun it. It's going to say, oh, I already have this extension. So what the force update tag does is, it says, oh, well, I have a new tag, so that means I need to rerun it. Really simple, quick, and easy way to do that is get date file time. That is, the number of ticks since 1601 or whatever Microsoft time starts at. So, unless you're running that command within the same milliseconds of each other, you're not going to have any collisions on that. Another thing to take into consideration here is that the command, again, like similar to the Linux, it runs through the shell. It's not running directly into PowerShell. So you have to include the PowerShell.exe or PWSH, depending on which version your machine has, and then you have to pass the command. Well, in the Azure VM one, you just pass a string file is a command. But as you saw here, we had to start doing some escape characters and things like that because it started getting kind of hairy because I'm creating a string that's really a script, those type of things. That could get even worse because we now have to convert this into JSON. So best way to handle that is to just convert it to base 64, right? And that's going to do is, we'll create the string here, right? Our system environment name, convert it to a base 64 string, which becomes, essentially alphanumeric. There's some pluses, equals, and things that you'll get in there. But essentially what you're not going to get is you're not going to get any, single quotes, double quotes, dollar signs, other things that will cause issues inside of your command, right? And if you're not aware, PowerShell does have the ability to run base 64 encoded scripts directly without having to do anything to decode them. So we build our JSON, build it into a hash table, and then convert it into a JSON. And it looks like this. So we have our command to execute. This becomes this long alphanumeric thing. And no matter how long or complicated your script is, you're using here strings or any other things that may cause issues when trying to convert it to string, that's going to take care of it right there for you. So you don't have to worry about any escape characters or anything along those lines. Just convert that sucker to base 64. And then we're going to submit it up to Azure. Right? We'll get a simple 202 telling us that uh, you know, it accepted the command. And again, if we look at the Linux side by side, it's some slight differences in here from the Windows side, but not much. It's has a different type name, but everything else is the same. On this one, I'm using Windows 7, still using the encoded command, and I'm submit that out, and I got my 202. All right, so now there is a command to be able to return the information that you had. So there's this get AZ connected machine extension. So essentially, what this does is it installs an extension on that Arc server. All right. So if I take a look at this Arc box here, this is the one I just ran it against, and I go into my extensions, I see this custom script extension that I just created. Right. So it is what this is going to do is it's going to contain all the information once that there's our output from the command right there. All right. So ours our machine name. All right. So what this commandlet does is you can get back that information that's in there through here, right? And it's going to come back in on the status message. Now, unfortunately, if you notice this status message, this isn't the entire string. It's ugly. Hey, they put a bunch of other stuff in here. If you look at the Azure VM one, you essentially had the instant output view, which is only your output information. So unfortunately, with the Arc agent, there is some string manipulation we have to do, but it's not too difficult to be able to get that built out there, right? And then do the same thing on the Linux side. For whatever reason, they decided to format it differently in Linux. So, but again, just a couple quick substrings and indexes, and there's our output data. All right. So, how can we use this? There's a lot of steps. A lot of Linux or Arc and all those type of things that kind of go with it. So basically, I'm going to take a look at how we can kind of combine this together into some functions to ease our life, right? And this right here is this is a script. This is actually from a chapter of my book on getting system info, right? It works on Windows, it works on Linux, whatever you want, right? So it's going to return back this data here. What I want to do is I want to run this script through Arc. There is no caveat for running a script through Arc or through a VM, right? But to make your life easier, you're always going to want to convert your results to a serialized form, right? In this case, we'll just go ahead and convert to JSON. So this is what would be returned from there. Because if you remember, in all these situations, whether it's the Arc one where you do kind of have to pick out your strings, or the Azure one where it is returning a string, it is returning a string. It's not returning an object. So if you want to be able to parse the data that you're returning, right, you want to go ahead and put that in as a JSON or XML or other parsable serialized text. All right, so I'm just going to take this get system info script, and we're just going to use this to run against our other devices here in a moment. So what we've done, or what I've done here, is just created a kind of a universal command for the invoke VM command. Right. So our difference between Windows and Linux was not much. It was remember, we just had to do a different command. Right. So all I'm doing is checking to see if it's a Linux box. If it is, I'm going to go ahead and just do the encoding and throw the PowerShell script on here, and then otherwise it's just going to run the set command as is. Right. And then a second simple script to just come back and say, get the provisioning state. So I know whether or not my command has completed running. And then come in here and get the output, right? So build some stuff in here to get that output. We can try to convert it from JSON. If not, we'll just go ahead and return the regular one. All right. But now we have a standardized object that we're going to return. We're going to return whatever our output was and whatever our error it was, right? So, if you're returning XML here, you would just, convert from XML as opposed from JSON. And then, so what that allows us to do here is I'm just going to, use a get content to essentially pull in that script that we just had here. And if you notice, between a Linux box, helps if I load my functions too. If I have a Linux box or I have a Windows box, my commands are essentially the same. The only difference is literally the machine name that I'm passing to it. All right. And then we can come down here, we can check the status on them. The Linux one ran faster. And then we can get our output.
Matt, the question.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't actually doing some intelligence and branching based on one job versus the other. You're just running them both against the appropriate OS.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Would there be a way in which you would envision that you would branch your code based on the OS, so you could do an OS test and then run one versus the other?
Yes. We'll get to that.
Oh, sweet.
So our Windows 1 finished, and we pulled back our data on there. All right, so now we can come down here, and we'll do a similar thing again with the Arc, right? So again, Arc makes it easier because Arc actually has the OS name built into it. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to find the actual OS information from an Azure VM. It's not the prettiest way to be able to get it, but there are certain ways if you're if it's a marketplace one, what have you. But again, we'll take a look at that here in just a minute. So the AZ connected machine is what gets your Arc devices, right? As opposed to the get AZ VM. Right, so Arc functions, same process again here, right? This is that same thing that we saw earlier for Windows. Basically this type changes, what our command execute changes, and then we're going to submit our request. Added in a little extra bit in here. So as I mentioned, when you do this custom script extension, it has to be named custom script extension. It's just the way that it is. It is, if it already exists, right? If I send this put command and then I automatically come back out and say, okay, I'm done, right? Chances are it's going to think that it was successful because that put is not waiting for a response back from the VM to say that it actually received it, or that it is processing it, right? It is saying that I got it. That's it. So what I'm doing here is doing a quick get the VM machine extension, and then checking if we are in update creating or waiting, right? Because what'll happen is if this already existed and you check this, the millisecond after this runs, it's going to say success. And you're not going to know whether or not it actually succeeded because that was the previous run that you're seeing. So what you're doing here is you're checking that my status has changed to something that I'm sure of is telling me that it is processing it, right? And then, of course, as always, if you ever build a while loop, have some sort of way to exit out of that. If it becomes unattainable, right? So if for whatever reason this doesn't ever return anything, we know that we're going to go ahead and we're going to exit after 30 seconds. All right. And then again, here, we're just going to have another function to get our state so we can check our status. And then we're going to, again, do some string manipulation to be able to get out our errors and our return data is any particular errors, right? I mean, I'm sure most of you on the call are more than familiar with substring and index of, right? That's all it really takes to get that out of there. So again, just like with the Windows VMs, we can come in here, start the Linux job, start the Windows Server job. Believe it or not, these things are actually pretty quick. And a lot of times they're faster than the Azure VMs. However, I will give one very strong word of caution. If you send the Linux command to a Windows machine, or you send the Windows command to a Linux machine, it will keep trying for 3 hours to run it. And there is no way to stop it. And if you try to resend it, it'll say, I'm already trying to process something. So just a word of caution. Ensure you know which OS you're sending that to before you send it, because it can cost you some hours just waiting for those to run through. So again, we see both of them has succeeded. Run here, we see that this is our Arc Ubuntu server. This is our Arc Win22 server. All right, so that's really it. So you can take these 3 commands and then build out a way to get it to run across everything that you could potentially want, right? So as you saw, you have the get AZ connected machine. For Arc boxes, you have the get AZ VM for virtual machines. They both contain different information in them when they come back. So, and as I mentioned before, with the get AZ command, if you've ever looked at this thing, trying to figure out what OS something is running is more of a pain than it's worth, right? So you have the OS profile, which is the Linux configuration, which works if it's a marketplace machine, but if it's your own custom machine, then it's not going to work. I could go on ad nauseum at that. I have no idea why they didn't do that, but to get around that, we can use Azure Resource Graph. Right. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Azure Resource Graph, it is it's another way to be able to query Azure resources. It uses the Kusto query language, just like Cosmos and Data Explorer and Log Analytics. And if you've ever noticed in a lot of Azure Windows now, you have this open query button, right, which will now open an Azure resource graph query for you, right? And you can run this, and you can get all sorts of information. It's in the Kusto language is pretty powerful. It's not doing it justice to say that it's SQL-like, because it is actually a lot more powerful. But the syntax is fairly similar to writing a SQL query, right? And you see some of these ones from Microsoft get a tad insane. But what that allows you to do here is, I just have a simple, resources, where my resources are, hybrid compute and virtual machine, right? That's the Azure types inside of Azure, right? Run query, and you get all the data back on all your machines. If you can actually drill down into the full details of these and see all the information on these. Oh, hey, look, there's where it actually says that it's a Windows, right? So, what that allows me to do is just to write a quick thing. And this looks like a lot, but it's not. All right. So if we actually break this down real quick, we're still good on time.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
Doing
Okay.
great.
Cool. So again, since we are joining two different types of systems together, right? We do have to do a little bit of data manipulation right here. We just do a quick if statement, because the VMs call it status, or I'm sorry, the Arc calls it status. VMs call it extended instance view of power status code. You're just going to remember that, right? So, join those in together to get, your one value. Just do a little bit of data cleanup, right? This is just concatenating strings together. Just a quick case statement to, make things pretty for you guys to see. It is the case sensitive language too, just to be aware. But in the end, what it's going to do is here's all my VMs and my Arc servers and everything, all in together. And I have, normalized data between them. So if you noticed when I showed these functions here, so the Arc execution, right? I kept these parameters the same between them, right? So then it becomes even easier. So now there is the search AZ graph commandlet. I don't know if this commandlet is included in AZ yet. So, if you do the install module AZ, it will install the majority of the Azure modules. This one, last time I checked, it wasn't, but it could be by now. But you can take any resource graph query, run it against that, and get your return data. So here's all of my machines. This is the same exact data that we just saw there in the console. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add some additional properties to these so that I can now track my run commands, my status, and my output. And if you noticed here, I built a little concurrent for. It's almost say, I have 6 devices here. So a quick while loop to go through, and we can say, for each device that is pending, right? Because we start out as pending, right? We want to go ahead and kick it off. So, here's my virtual machines. Here's my Arc devices. I don't care if it's Windows or Linux. It's going to split out on there. You could even create yourself another wrapper function on top of this to do that automatically for you. Because as you can see, the parameters are the same, right? If our job runs, we submit it. If we get an error, we'll throw an error. And then essentially another little loop down here to get the status. So what this is going to allow us to do, the big thing here is that if our ones that are in a running state are greater than our concurrent number, we're going to wait. So, we're not going to kill our system trying to run all of these at once, right? So we can load balance, keep this thing kind of smart. As it goes through, it'll kick off, the different jobs on the different machines. And then at the very end, as it goes through those, we see it got those, skipped a couple, right? It's going to pause for 30 seconds. I probably should have made that a little slower for demoing purposes. I'll change that to 3 seconds. should actually probably finish through this time. But all 6 machines are all running the same exact script. They're all going to get, their data returned, however that particular, whether it's a Linux Arc, whether it's a, Azure VM Arc, what have you, right? We see where we've succeeded on all of them. So we can just go loop back through them all and say, give me the output. And it's going to go back and get the output. And we can then loop through each machine. So now we see every single one of our machines here. We got the data back for them, right? So as I mentioned, this originally came out, or I originally wrote this for Log4j. This is a lot fancier version of that, but it is out there on my Gist, this Log4j, and this has some additional things built in to be able to record when it runs. It'll write to a CSV file to keep track of when it ran, so that if you restart it, it's not gonna re-hit the machines that it's already hit before, because we ran this at some places with thousands of machines, right? One other caveat I will say with Arc and this particular extension is we have had some issues when running it behind a proxy. For whatever reason, it didn't like a proxy. It was still in preview at that time. I haven't been able to retest it since, but if you're behind a proxy, there may be some issues. The rest of the Arc functionality works great. It was just this particular item here, and Microsoft was aware of it, and they are working on it. So, with that, that's pretty much what I got. So,
So hold on here. I wanna go back to that. I'll say Gist. Maybe it's Gist. GistPad extension. I just caught that. I didn't even know about that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw that from Justin Brute.
Oh, jeez, he knows everything.
Yeah. So yeah, you can grab all your Gists and pull them right in here. Yep.
Yeah, that is cool.
So my GitHub, Gist, Twitter, Mastodon, everything is basically Dowst. One of the benefits of having a strange last name.
Hey, so a couple of things here. So really, really like the demo. I really like those scripts that you made and the ease in which it helps with stuff. Switch gears for a second. We have a few minutes here.
Yep.
Tell people a little bit about your book. More than just go out and buy it. What's in the book?
So I wrote this book. It's been a year in the making now. When I first started writing it, and I wrote it from the point of view of what I do in my day to day at work is automating IT life cycles, right? And I often find a lot of people are hesitant to get into automation, right? Most automations are, some, a sysadmin or a DevOps guy, who wrote a script to be able to save himself some time. And that thing's been running for who knows how long, and everybody's afraid to touch it. I've been to a Fortune 500 company that had a desktop that had a big sticker that said "Do not turn off" because there was some automation running on it that broke Exchange when that thing turned off. Right. So what this book does is it breaks down automation, and it's written in PowerShell because basically I live in PowerShell, but the content and the philosophies behind it are universal, right? So it goes through a concept of building blocks of how to create modular automations that you can maintain and that you can, improve upon. You know, an example that I always give is, you have, you know, user provisioning request, right? So you need to onboard a user, your typical AD, Azure AD, Salesforce, what have you, right? You write all of that in PowerShell with all of the functionality and stuff like that in PowerShell, then it doesn't matter where your data is coming from, right? So if you're using ServiceNow, and then you switch to Salesforce, right? All you have to do is repoint that script from one, to another. Maybe redo a couple mappings, things like that. But nothing is set inside of that platform, and that's what that's where PowerShell is great. As we were talking about before on this call, is using Azure Functions, right? Azure Function, I could easily take that same exact script that I'm running in a function and run it in Azure Automation, or I could run it on my local box, or I could run it in Jenkins or Ansible or what have you. So it's building those modular requests and then making them in such a way that you can maintain them, right? So really kind of going through, showing examples of, how do you get secure data inside of your scripts? How do you, that's the biggest thing right there. If you look at automation, they need to be secure. You can't go to a CISO and say, "Oh, yeah, I just hard coded a password in there." No, that's not going to work, right? So, and then building things. Don't Excel is not a database, and with tools like DBA tools, you don't need to use Excel, right? You can set your foundation and your groundwork, and then your automations become a click of a button. This Arc is a great example here. Do a little bit of legwork, get those agents installed, and then you can, manage all of your machines with a single script, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go back every single time. When the next log for J comes out, you don't have to worry about it, right? Hey, I have this set up. Now all I got to do is just plug in this script and execute it on all these machines.
And so, what would you say is the knowledge level that someone who might be interested in your book needs to be at in order to appreciate how to jump in and use the topics that you're covering?
So I would say, I tried to. I wouldn't say a beginner, right? So but if you've read PowerShell and Monthly Luncheons, then you have everything that you need to be able to hop in here and start doing this. As long as you can understand how to write functions, simple things like splatting, and then that's pretty much about it, right? From there forward, it's just pure PowerShell.
And so it's good for people who want to learn the concepts of automation. If they don't know all the code because they're not up to the skill level yet, they can develop that. But if you have some level of PowerShell knowledge prior to purchasing this book, you should be able to rock on the concepts that are in there without much issue.
Yep. Definitely.
Cool. And I see it's a Manning book, right? So
it is.
Yep. So guys can get that on Manning.com and a bunch of other places. And so I want to say thank you to Matt tonight for sharing all those cool scripts for Azure Arc. Azure Arc's a huge topic. We've just scratched the surface. There's plenty more you can do with it. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you're joining us on YouTube and it's first time, check out the YouTube channel. We have about 120 other videos on PowerShell and cloud-related topics. I'm sure you can find something that is interesting to you. If you like this presentation tonight and you'd like to join us in person, you can find us on meetup.com, the Research Triangle PowerShell user group, or you can go to rtpsug.com. We meet on the first and third Wednesday of the month. We'd love to have you join us so you can come and join us live and get to ask questions of Matt yourself rather than watching it afterwards. And so we hope you join us for the next one. And so with that, I want to say a big thank you to Matt, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight.